rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events, this is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. Oh, that was weird. That was a different... Well, I put together my my automations again, and apparently that one... that one didn't fade, or didn't go through like it normally should. Anyway, probably has to deal with the way that I think, but all right, we'll fix that later. Anyway, hello everyone. Welcome to the program. I am obviously your host, Rick. I'm also everything else around here. Anyway, so I've got a good discussion for you tonight. There were a couple of things that occurred in regards that were posted in public, and it made me think a little bit about what is happening in terms of the judicial scenario with all of these judges putting out injunctions and all these other things that are being dealt with by the Trump administration. So, yeah. Anyway, we'll get right into that here in just a minute. First up, of course, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight's Pledge of Allegiance is going to be led by none other than G. So I haven't seen G in the chat yet, but G is going to be the one who's leading us in the pledge. So if you are of mind, please stand, remove your hat if you're wearing one like me, place your hand over your heart, and join in with G in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And, of course, I thank you, G, for sending in that wonderful rendition of the pledge. If you would like to hear your rendition of the pledge played here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself reciting the pledge in your style, and then take that audio or video file, whatever file, and attach it to an email address. Send it off to fans, F-A-N-S, at americanperspective.online. That's fans at americanperspective.online. And I will get you into the rotation order as soon as I possibly can, of course, because that's just the way things roll. All right, tonight's headline sponsor. Here we go. Some of these automations. Here we go. The Institute on the Constitution. Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission, and that is to restore the constitutional republic, which we're not in right now, through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content about it, to learn about our historical founding, and of course support the show in the process. That's IOTC.AmericanPerspective.online, or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.americanperspective.online. Check this thing out. It's got 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather wrapped around pages that are water and tear resistant. The binding is stitched all the way through. There's no cheap glue here, folks. Stitched all the way through the leather. It's got a 100-year warranty against materials and manufacturing defects, such that if you have a problem, send it back to the manufacturer and they will either fix it or replace it for free. It has, according to my Rumbler, folks, my Rumbler Whiskey Warrior P1s, it has sexy rounded corners. It has been buddy tested, buddy approved, Billy tasted, Billy approved, and my youngest Whiskey Warrior has confirmed the information inside will help you study for your civics badge and scouts, as well as probably your civics test as well. Once again, go to constitution.americanperspective.online and go and check out the rest of the Institute on the Constitution's offerings as well. I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate. All right. Yeah, that is correct. It can be used. Well, actually, I think that a lot of these federal judges, and especially our people in Congress, need to read the damn thing, because I don't think they are at this point in time. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Let's get on to the first things first. Trump signed an executive order to abolish the Department of Education. Well, let's be honest. He didn't really sign it to abolish it. He signed an executive order to shrink it. Because unfortunately, Congress apparently has to weigh in on that. The total abolishment of it, but he definitely has control to be able to shrink it. So there you go. So he went ahead and did that this morning. Had a big video to do about it too, which is actually pretty cool. I don't have the audio or the video here. I obviously I've got more, much more larger important items to cover, but believe me, there were a lot of people, especially of those on the left, who were freaking out about this because of the fact that the Department of Education is their baby. I mean, Randy Weingarten is probably just flipping out, literally flipping out about it. All right. So that's one thing. But we also have a bunch of conversations that are running around about all of these judges that are just willy-nilly hitting, temporary restraining orders, injunctions, whatever you want to call them, against the presidency. Now, honestly, this is creating what I would consider to be a constitutional crisis right here in front of us. Now, you recall that before Donald Trump got elected, I mentioned here on this program multiple times that I felt like the country was going to get a clear and decisive education on the Constitution and federalism in terms of all this. So that, of course, is, coming true. Now, a lot of these judges that are out there, which, by the way, some of them are radical leftists, of course. Radical leftists, and a lot of these judges are also associated with radical leftists. And they're definitely Obama-appointed judges, Biden-appointed judges. Obviously, they have the same as Mark Levin says, American Marxist ideology to it and to their particular scenarios. And so it's no real surprise that they are potentially usurping their authority. Now, let's just take this a step back here, because I want everybody to understand, okay, that essentially where all of this stems from, honestly, comes from a 1803 decision by the Supreme Court called Marbury versus Madison. And that decision by the 1803 Supreme Court has set up the concept of what is known as judicial review. Now, judicial review doesn't show up in the Constitution. In fact, the only part of the Constitution that even covers the judiciary branch is, of course, Article 3. Now, I know all of my Whiskey Warrior P1s know this because they know the Constitution. And Article 3 was the last thing that was written prior to the Constitutional Convention being shut down. After being there for, 100 days, they decided, we're just going to leave this to the First Continental Congress. And so it's a very small article. It was very sparse on details. And they knew that they were going to have to put a lot more detail into the concept of a judiciary. But the thing about it is that this 1903 Supreme Court decision is sort of an interesting decision in the fact that it gave the judiciary branch as a whole the idea of being able to review legislative and presidential orders in, again, the concept called, basically known as judicial review. Well, here's the problem, though. That same Supreme Court decision didn't provide any idea of enforcement of those. It essentially was using and relying on the fact that the president and or Congress would be, shall we say, open to the idea of this whole thing where the Supreme Court basically gives an order, says, you can't do that, and then the president respects it. Now, there have been times where presidents have not respected it. Andrew Jackson, I think, was one that didn't. And so anyway, the point being is, actually Andrew Jackson did defy the Supreme Court in particular when he allowed Georgia to expel Cherokees off of their land. But many presidents have unhappily followed Supreme Court judgments over the past century and a half. Barack Obama did, which is amazing, but Joe Biden didn't. I mean, Joe Biden didn't abide by the whole idea of, the student loan forgiveness thing. But I want to bring to everyone's attention here in a little bit, after I kind of talk a little bit about some of these cases, is that the first sentence of Article 3 gives us an indication as to whether or not these individuals, meaning these federal district court judges, actually have the ability and the authority to essentially issue these, what I've been calling blanket injunctions and nationwide injunctions. But before we do that, I need to go back through and I want to talk a little bit about each one of these cases. For an example, you have the most recent district judge that basically tried to stop the deportation of a bunch of Tren de Aragua criminals, as well as some other criminals. Okay. And Attorney General Pam Bondi today, this in the Epic Times, let me go ahead and get on over there. Get on over there. She is. U.S. Attorney General says district judge has no right to ask flight deportation questions. What this is doing basically is the judge is asking for Trump administration officials to come to court and testify in terms of how these kind of things can happen. Why they didn't turn the plane around, why they didn't, call the plane and bring them back, and so on and so forth. Well, this is U.S. District Judge James Boasberg has given the Trump administration until Tuesday to respond to his questions about deportation flights carrying the alleged members, they're not alleged, we know they are, of Tren de Aragua gangs, or gang, which was designated by the administration as foreign terrorist organization, over the past weekend following the order that he issued to suspend deportations after the administration invoked the 1798 Alien Act. Now, the thing about it is, and I'm going to play a piece from Mark Levin's podcast, and I'll explain it before I play it. But the thing about it is that there's some question as to whether or not the written order actually came out in time, because the plane had already departed U.S. soil, was in international waters, which means that the district court judge literally didn't, not figuratively, but literally has zero power at that moment. And so there's some question as to when the planes took off. There was one plane still on the ground at the time. When the plane took off, and also whether or not his verbal order or verbal opinion counts. Mark handles that in just a minute. But yeah, Bondi told Fox News on Wednesday that such questions are inappropriate and the judge has no right to ask those questions, as well as no power to order the government to return those flights back to the United States, adding that she believes liberal judges are issuing orders on matters that they have no jurisdiction over, which is all of the point that I'm making. Okay. And so anyway, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on right now, and this is just one case. There's also a case, there's also some evidence too that the judge who is attempting to block these deportations played a key role in the Trump-Russia FISA saga. So here, Boasberg was in his role as the head of the FISA court. He made a number of divisive decisions, including a slap on the wrist for a member of the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane team, which Crossfire Hurricane, for those that don't remember, was the operation that spied on President Trump in his incoming administration at the time, his first term. Now, Trump, of course, and also too, he was part of the appointment of officials who had defended the FBI's actions during the Russiagate saga, the renewal of the FBI's FISA powers, as well as more. He had a role as the head of the FISA court at the time. So anyway, Trump had invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act this month. And this guy, of course, obviously issued the order temporarily blocking the administration from using the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to carry out deportations. Yeah. So now, Trump came out and did say something on Truth Social on Tuesday with, against this judge in particular, and called for his impeachment. Okay. And so, yeah, Chief Justice John Roberts, Supreme Court John Roberts, went ahead and released a statement to some of the media outlets where he was he didn't come out and say it, but he sort of said it. He was rebuking Trump directly about the whole impeachment process. Now, he suggested that the normal appellate review process exists for the purpose of overturning lower court judges' decisions. I contend, and I'm going to make a little bit of a case tonight, that he didn't have the authority, period, and should have immediately just been like, I don't have the authority to look over this. You need to go to a different court. Okay? That's what that's what he should have done. Now, it's also interesting in this Just the News piece that Roberts appointed Boasberg to a 7-year term on the FISA court starting in May of 2014. So, yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of connection here. And so now you can kind of see we're starting to get into a point where this is getting into some serious questionable areas in terms of all this. Now, there's another judge who attempted and has put out a block to the Trump admin's military transgender ban. And this is in red state. However, there's a problem with this ruling that may save it, meaning that it may save the Trump administration. So this judge, Judge Anna Reyes of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, issued a preliminary injunction barring the Trump administration's new rules on transgender individuals serving in the armed forces. Okay. There is a problem, though. That injunction relies on literally, objectively false information and independent research done by the judge herself. Now, this is not something that you can do. Okay. Laura Powell posted this on X and points out this little bit of a problem. And she basically says that Judge Reyes's opinion relies in part on her independent research into disorders of sexual development, which is not part of the record, meaning not part of the court record. Judges aren't allowed to do that. Whatever is in the court record is the only thing that can be allowed or disallowed as a part of the decision. Okay? Not only that, but according to Laura Powell, her information is actually wrong. So according to Laura, she cites that the judge cites an erroneous figure that 1.7% of Americans are intersex. She's also making assertions about where people with DSDs should be housed based on literally no evidence whatsoever. She asked the DOJ attorney to answer to that question, and he said that he did not know. This case has nothing to do with people with DSDs, Laura continues, many of whom were banned from serving in the military for years after the ban on trans people was lifted, which was never, ever challenged. Okay? So, yeah. Yeah, that probably means that this may, when on appeal, get overturned on procedural grounds. For how that goes. Well, Mark Levin made an appearance with Martha McCallum. Now, I believe it was on Martha McCallum's show, The Story, but I'm not 100% certain. And this following clip that I'm about ready to play for you, well, let's just say Mark Levin, who is a lawyer, worked in the Attorney General's office under Ronald Reagan, and pretty much, I would say, probably knows the law and the constitutional law in particular so much better than a lot of these people. He goes ahead and renders his opinion with regards to all of this. Now, it's a 6-minute long thing, so bear with me, okay, on it, but it's very important for you to be able to listen to this legal opinion with regards to the entire situation. So here we go.
This, I want to put up here the Landmark Legal Foundation, which you were arguing on behalf of and you're part of, versus EPA decision back in 2003, which essentially says that this kind of directive, injunction from a judge must be recorded in writing, not just a verbal decision by the judge. Explain how this impacts what's going on with Boasberg and these flights to El Salvador.
Let me try and help this renowned radical left-wing judge. This is called Judging 101. If you want people to do something, they need to understand what you want them to do. Martha, there's a lot of people in between that courtroom and that flight. President of the United States isn't in the courtroom. The Attorney General is not in the courtroom. The Secretary of DHS isn't in the courtroom. Literally hundreds and hundreds of people are affected by this judge's order. He knows this. He's a judge in the District of Columbia where the bureaucracy thrives. So when you're a judge, Judge 101, you don't just sit at the bench and say, you know, you ought to stop doing this and stop doing that. It doesn't necessarily get to everybody, certainly not in a timely way. He figured it out. It was a little late. It's only been the custom, practice, and tradition in that courtroom for at least 23 years when I litigated this case, which is put your damn order in writing, Judge, so the people you're bullying around and ordering around know exactly what you're doing. It's called giving them notice. That's what it called. So let me help the appellate judges, some of whom are equally renowned for being left-wing, which is this. This is separation of powers. The fact that petitioners are radical leftists, Democrats, attorneys general in blue states, union bosses, and worse, who are bringing these cases in these cities where they know these judges from Biden, Obama, and Clinton exist. This whole thing is becoming a sham. The American people are losing faith in the judiciary. We can't have a judicial oligarchy of unelected judges at the trial court level who aren't even in the Constitution telling the president what to do on human resources, on the border, on deporting criminal illegal aliens. I mean, wait until we get to non-criminal illegal aliens. Can't tell him he can't look at payroll. He can't look at data. What is it that the president can do? Martha, these are ministerial tasks. These are normal tasks for a president of the United States. Notice it only goes one way. Biden violates immigration laws. The border's wide open. Criminal aliens are coming in. Terrorists are coming in. Fentanyl coming in. And the judges sit on their hands. And I can go over and over. This is the greatest assault, listen to me, on the Constitution, separation of powers, Article 2, the power of the presidency in modern American history.
So
and
let
these
me ask you, Mark,
judges, while they may not talk to each other, they see what each other are doing.
So there's 600 and some judges at this level. You know, in terms of the Supreme Court, if it's as egregious as you say, what would you expect to hear from them? We know yesterday Justice Roberts weighed in really on behalf of the judges' right to say this, and the process is going to play out. There's a hearing on March 21st. What do you think the Supreme Court should do, if anything?
I would say that John Roberts, who I knew before he was a judge, when we both worked in the Reagan administration, it's time to grow up here, Judge. Think about Justice Rehnquist. What would Justice Rehnquist, the Chief Justice, have done when those 4 originalists 2 weeks ago, when this case involving another rogue Democrat judge, ordered the President of the United States to spend money on foreign activities? What would Rehnquist have done? Would he have joined the 4 or would he have joined the radical 3? This is an issue of separation of powers, and if it's not resolved, You basically, in the form of your question, have answered it. How the hell are we going to have 680 individual, unelected federal judges, they're federal district judges, not federal national judges, all sitting there behind their desks with their 2 or 3 clerks saying, you know, I don't like this idea, Trump sending this. I don't like this idea, banning transgender. I don't like this idea. This is exactly what Locke and Montesquieu and Jefferson and Madison warned. When you have a combination of branches rather than separation of branches, and Scalia did too, you have a tyranny. And I don't care about what John Roberts pronounces from the bench. Do your job, Chief Justice of the United States. Don't get into the political fight. Fix it. Because if you don't fix it, we're going to lose our constitutional construct, or Congress is going to have to figure out some way to fix it. And one other thing, the idea, and I've even heard it on my beloved network from some of these former whatevers, that we shouldn't raise our voice. That's our job. This government exists for we the people. It doesn't exist for John Roberts, the judges, Congress, or anybody else. This whole thing was set up for us, to protect us. When these judges are conducting themselves this way, when they're interfering with an election, when they're grabbing, seizing power in front of our eyes, we're all smart. We see it from the executive branch, a president of the United States. He's elected nationally. They're created by Congress. They're not even in the Constitution. They're using a power, judicial review, that's not even in the Constitution, that was created by the Supreme Court in 1803. They should at least have some level of deference to the President of the United States. And notice one other thing. Compare the number of restraining orders, injunctions, and reversals that Donald Trump has had with the last 10 presidents of the United States.
We just have those up on the board, Mark.
It is grotesque.
Okay. So there was a lot there. I mean, a lot there to unpack. All right. Let's take this a little bit here, one by one. So the first thing that he talks about, or that he mentions in terms of all this, and honestly, he kind of goes off, which he does whenever this stuff like this happens. Okay. And he gets all wound up about this, and trust me, I know. And you should go, if you get the opportunity, you should go and listen to his podcast, because this is where he played this. He played it on last night's show and talked about it on last night's show. And here's the thing. Okay. First of all, Mark Levin is 100% correct. If you look in the Constitution, there is no reference to judicial review in the Constitution at all. Okay. There's no reference or even inkling of a suggestion of a power of judicial review. Like I told you, Article 3 was written very, very hastily. Now, let's talk about these district court judges, federal district courts that are in there. And yes, I am pulling out my wonderful copy of the Constitution of the United States. Here in Section 1, sentence number 1, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts, and here's the key, as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Now, here's part of the problem with this, okay? And this isn't really a problem with that statement, okay? I kind of misspoke there. This isn't a problem with the statement. This is a problem with the idea that these district court judges have authority over the constitutionally developed, constitutionally placed, the duly elected by a nationwide body of people president. Okay. There is nothing in there that says that these district court judges have authority. Because as you'll notice, the Congress shall at time to time deem necessary. meaning that Congress can actually destroy or take away this whole justice or this whole court system that they developed. Congress cannot interfere with, outside of the specific things that are written in the Constitution, they cannot interfere with the president's authority and his actions in terms of executing the law that they write. The same way that the president cannot necessarily go to Congress and essentially say, yeah, I don't like the way you're doing stuff either. You're done. That is what I'm talking about. These lower courts do not have constitutional authority over the president or Congress. So where they get this idea, their authority is limited to the district to which they preside over. They don't have the authority to do all of these nationwide injunctions. And as I've told you on this program before, the nationwide injunctions were and have been a creation, the very first one, creation of the 20th century, the very first one showed up in 1960. In fact, before that, there was even some Supreme Court cases that discussed it and said that this isn't even a power. The idea of the nationwide injunction doesn't exist. They can't do this. Now, they may think they can, but they can't. It's a constitutional question. And this honestly was something that the Supreme Court should have picked up and taken. They should have taken it up, and they didn't bother to. There's a couple different ways that this kind of stuff can be handled. One of them is not been used in a very, very long time. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about 1775 coffee. Weak coffee is for the weak, and at Rumble, weak has never been a part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, and no settling for mediocrity. Just like 1775 coffee. It's single origin, small farm, hand-picked, specialty grade coffee that stands for quality, free speech, and calling out BS when it matters. Forget stale mass-produced beans roasted just enough to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And the Vitality Mushroom Blend, which gives you real energy and lasting focus. No synthetic garbage. For K-Cup pods, whole beans, or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775 Coffee. That's all one word. The number 1775coffee.com. Use promo code STUDIO for 15% off and start your morning with coffee that actually stands for something. Go to 1775coffee.com. Use promo code STUDIO, STUDIO, get 15% off your order. Once again, go to 1775coffee.com. Use promo code STUDIO for 15% off and start your morning with coffee that actually stands for something. Oh, and by the way, every dollar spent at 1775coffee.com enters you to win a Cybertruck and a chance to win $30,000 in cash. Go to 1775, that's 1775coffee.com. Use promo code STUDIO for 15% off. And remember, start your morning with coffee that actually stands for something. All right. So, we have an option here, folks. We actually have a couple of options. That, I mean, outside of the fact that, you know, the people, well, the people own the government. We know this. We haven't enacted our rights and privileges very often outside of the voting booth. But here's the thing. There is actually something that the Trump administration can do. And it's outlined a little bit here in this Blaze Media article. It's an opinion piece written by Michael Fragoso, Fragoso, Fragoso. Here he said, and he points out that there is a legal move that could stop these anti-Trump lawsuits immediately in their tracks. Now, he describes this legal move with the idea that, of course, Trump's enemies are weaponizing all of the courts against them, which, by the way, Mark Levin talks about that on his podcast after that clip that I played for you. He actually talks about it, where it's something like 60% of all of the injunctions that were issued in this century, basically, have been against Donald Trump. And over 90% of those 60% of those injunctions came from leftist appointed judges. So don't sit here and tell me that this isn't a partisan issue. It is. It's totally a partisan issue. But a rarely used legal tool could actually strip these district court judges of their power. Now, what is this legal tool? This legal tool is called the writ of prohibition. Now, the writ of prohibition, which is originating, this is from the piece, originating in English common law, was popularly used to resolve jurisdictional court disputes. Again, as I pointed out, these district court judges, federal district court judges, do not have the jurisdictional authority to order the President of the United States around. The Supreme Court does. Okay? But this thing, and again, keep in mind, this is called the writ of prohibition. So to explain it, if a court improperly exercised jurisdiction over an ecclesiastical matter, for instance, the King's Bench, and this is talking about the history of it, the King's Bench could issue a writ of prohibition to divest it of its authority. Now, in the United States, the writ was initially rare but gained a broader applicability with the creation of the modern circuit courts of appeal. And it basically was allowing appellate courts to act in aid of their jurisdiction, meaning that, according to one appellate court, to invoke the writ, there needs to be a clear instance of a court violating its jurisdiction without any other available way to challenge its actions. This is exactly what Trump is facing right now. Okay? See, here, the district court simply lacks the jurisdiction to issue these nationwide injunctions. And so it's possible to go after these courts and get these courts to basically understand, hey, you guys don't have that authority. You don't have jurisdiction. And so therefore, this writ of prohibition removes your ability, or even removes any of this, from the idea that you can stop me from doing what I am doing, because you don't have that authority. That isn't part of your jurisdiction. Now, in looking at this Blaze Media article, I had to bounce it off of a site that I am familiar with and trust for legal matters, which of course is Cornell Law. And here it is. The writ of prohibition. It's a judicial order that may be used at a higher court's discretion to prevent a lower court from interfering with the higher court's determination of a case pending an appeal. Writs of prohibition are sometimes issued to prohibit lower courts from issuing orders over matters over which it has no jurisdiction. And alternatively, the writ of prohibition may also be used to prevent relitigating issues that have already been decided by a higher court. Now, the writ of prohibition, according to Cornell law, has been described as a drastic remedy and the legal equivalent of the equitable remedy of injunction. As a result, any petition for writ should only be granted where the petitioner has no other adequate means of relief. New York courts have further explained that even when the requirements for a writ of prohibition are met, the remedy is not mandatory, and the courts hold the ultimate discretion on whether or not to exercise this authority. So, again, this is an opportunity for the Trump administration to basically do something about this through legal means. Okay? They can use this writ of prohibition. But there's another body, another outside body, outside of the legislative system, that could potentially do something about this. Should they decide to all of a sudden grow some actual balls and take this on. That Ron DeSantis has pointed out in X. So there was a post by, let me find it here. So there was a post by Representative Chip Roy. And Chip Roy said, lots of noise about impeachment. We must study every ruling and act accordingly with everything on the table. And he's noting, of course, that 14 Dem votes would be required in the Senate in order to reach that 60. Okay. But he said there's more fertile ground. For an example, the House can pass a resolution stating that there is or was an invasion. And number two, we can defund the radical courts. Now, Roy kind of sort of hit on the issue. But Ron DeSantis replied to that and literally dropped the hammer. He said, Congress has the authority to strip jurisdiction of the federal courts to decide these cases in the first place. The sabotaging of President Trump's agenda by resistance judges was predictable. Why have there been no jurisdiction stripping bills teed up at the onset of this Congress? DeSantis wrote this on X. Now, again, I go back to the point of the Article 3, first statement, toward the end. It says, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Congress has the authority over these lower courts. The federal court system, the federal district court system that the left is attempting to utilize here is under Congress's control. And that's what Ron DeSantis is referring to. The first Congressional Congress created the lower court structure. They created it. The only court that Congress does not have control over is simply the Supreme Court, which is constitutionally created. And even then, Congress does actually have a little bit of power over the Supreme Court. That power basically meaning that they can decide what cases the Supreme Court can actually preside over, with the exception of a few of them that are constitutionally mandated. Granted, all of this is sort of setting up a big constitutional crisis, but the reality of it is we have the authority and the ability to stop all of this, should Congress actually gain some cojones and get this done. Now, it's not only just that, but you also have to understand, too, that, for an example, the writ of prohibition could also be utilized not just to say that, hey, the district court is lower and therefore, and created by Congress, therefore it doesn't have the authority to block a president. You could go that route. Or what you could do is you could also go with the route that, hey, Congress has already created alternatives that are more appropriate for hearing these cases. For an example, okay, the jurisdiction of contract disputes, Congress, okay, determined that contract disputes belong in the specialty court of federal claims. So these district courts don't even have the jurisdictional authority necessarily based on what Congress, which has the plenary power over these lower courts, has already said. No. Contract disputes, like the one that was dealing with the USAID deal, that should have actually been in the specialty court of federal claims. So that writ of prohibition could be used to basically say you don't have this jurisdiction because of the fact that Congress created a specialty court specific for this. Similarly, some of the cases that have been involving adverse personnel actions, meaning all of those people that the court figured was, the Trump administration fired all these people. And now they got to take them back because this district court judge issued an injunction saying you can't fire these people. Well, guess what? Civil service laws written by Congress were designated for the Merit Systems Protection Board. That's where they're supposed to go. Again, writ of prohibition can be given to the courts and saying, you don't have jurisdiction here. Congress, which created you, says that this needs to go to this other place, not in front of you. All we need is for somebody to have the wherewithal to basically go and put in these legal actions. And Congress, too, needs to have these legal actions and should actually be assisting President Trump in all of this. But they aren't, at least not from any appearances. All right. Whew, I hope all of that made sense to you. I know it made sense to me. All right. Really, really quickly. There is some suggestion by certain legal analysts, just to kind of head into this direction, that there might be a constitutional purpose that essentially is saying that the auto pen may not actually be legal in terms of signing all of, now the executive orders are one thing, but signing the pardons, because executive orders actually don't really reside in the Constitution. Okay. All of that is just a part of what the president created in his own Article 2 function. But as far as pardons, they are defined in the president or in the Constitution. The same thing as well that with signing laws. So they are suggesting that because of the fact that the Constitution clearly vests numerous powers into the president, and by the way, the president is the man, not the office. Okay. There is some suggestion that when it comes to signing or vetoing bills, signing or vetoing resolutions, orders, certain legislative votes, nominating, commissioning officers, granting reprieves and pardons, that all of these require the president's personal action, meaning personal action, meaning that he shall perform some kind of an action. These mandates, according to this analysis, are exclusive to the president constitutionally, and therefore it is well established that the president cannot delegate these decisions to just anyone. The thought process is that includes signing, or what they say as affixing his wet signature to the documents. Because the president affixing his wet signature on not only signifies consent, but also is the legally required act in order for those things to be legal. So, that essentially, now keep in mind, the president can seek advice, but the final decision and responsibility on a lot of these things rests with the president alone, not the office of the president, but the president alone. And of course, since the nation's founding, they say, it's been a requirement of the president's wet signature on key documents, and those have served as a vital safeguard against fraud and unauthorized authority. Think of a wet signature sort of as the insignia that was put into wax in the old days when you would be sealing a document. They had specific crests and things that they would have on rings and stuff that they would use to press into the wax as they were sealing a document up to essentially prove its authenticity. If you can't do that with a physical signature and you're resorted to using the auto pen, then you have no authenticity there. There's no guarantee that they're called signet rings. Thank you, 3 Chevy. There's no way to authorize something from a machine like this. So the question is going to be essentially if a court case comes out of this, is whether or not the use of the auto pen is going to really and truly be considered an acceptable use for the constitutionally appointed items that the president and the president alone has been vested in order to be able to function in terms of his duties. This is going to be, I'm telling you, we're going to see in terms of constitutionality on all of this stuff, provided that the originalists can actually get the proper readings and rulings on all of these. All right, folks, that is it for me for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free. And once you are signed up and signed in, make sure that you search up the American Perspective channel and hit that green follow button to get notified every time that I go live. Also, too, before you take off, don't forget to hit those thumbs up buttons and like buttons across all of my platforms, whether it's X, YouTube, Facebook, and, of course, the aforementioned Rumble. We will see you tomorrow night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.